Croeso and welcome to Cardiff Referees Society's meeting with FAW Chief Executive Noel Mooney. Noel joined the FAW in August 2021 after previously working with UEFA as Head of Strategic Development.
Look, there is a lot of change in football. We'll talk big picture for a few minutes and then we'll come back down to see what we've done on match officials specifically, because I think we've done quite a lot actually in the 4 or 5 months I've been here. Mark Adams is beside me, who's the chair of the referees committee. I know, for example, that when I joined, there was a real problem with getting match officials and there was a lot of concern around it, but Mark has put a strategy together. We've just brought in a new head of refereeing. Lee Evans is joining us, and then we're recruiting, as you may know, for a referee or match official recruitment and retention officer, which it doubles the size of our department. And I'm hoping that they're all successful so that we can bring more people in at some stage. But for now, we have to deliver the strategy. We need to get to, I think it's 1,500 match officials we're trying to get to. I think the real number we have is probably somewhere around 800. Mark will correct me. It could be 1,000 on the common system, but in terms of actual active referees and that, we need to get to 1,500 match officials. So look, I think it's clear to see that in that one area, match officials, which is crucial, that we're already doing our stuff. That said, we still have a lot to do around respect for match officials. And that's something that we're going to, I'd say, do a lot on in the next couple of years. And I take your feedback is very important on that, because as you know, by my accent, I'm Irish. We had a referee who was beaten up last year, and there was a big hurrah about it, and then it all calms down again. It comes back again. So it's something that we just can't tolerate. But that's another discussion. First of all, I just know about Welsh football. So I joined last summer from UEFA. I was head of strategy there, so I worked with all 55 national associations on their planning, their business, their performance, their you name it. From top to bottom, their governance. And I wouldn't have come here if I didn't think there was a chance to make it the best football federation in the world, and we certainly can. I had worked with the Portuguese FA in 2012, Poland around the same time, and they were pretty useless generally. Now they're superstars. I mean, if you look at the Portuguese FA, how it performs off the pitch, whether it's regional development, there's 22 regions of Portugal, they've got 3 staff in each of the regions, properly performance managed, continual growth in participation, very digitalized. The coaching in Portugal is a bit different to here. To become a coach in Portugal, when Ronaldo was 6 in Madeira, the first coach he met had done 4 years of university in PE, plus 140 hours of Portuguese FA education. So it means the first coach you see in Portugal is top class, which is why they produce so many very good players. But where we're sitting tonight is means a lot to me in Whitchurch, because I thought coming up here one night that I was going to come to the home of Gareth Bale. I know he's from around the corner here, and I know that they've got 600 players at the club. So I came up here expecting to see a beautiful facility. I wasn't long here, and I was shown a kind of borrowed pitch up at the NHS on the grounds up here, and that was my introduction almost to Welsh football. And then I went around to Sully Sports, beautiful location, but the guys tried to put, whoever's down there, tried to put a pitch together using, I don't know, sellotape and bits of steel and stuff. I mean, it kind of struck me really quickly that there was a problem I hadn't envisaged coming here, which was grassroots facilities, where some of you people have to get changed. You know, so the facilities you're going into are not normal. They might become normal to you because you haven't seen it else. But again, Ireland has no more money than Wales that I'm aware of, or nothing extraordinary, no more resources than Wales have. But the facilities at grassroots level are far better in the villages and the towns there. And I couldn't really understand the reason why. And then I looked at the funding that we get. We get £1 million a year through our trust. That's it, from Sport Wales, and essentially nothing more. If you look at the FAI, for example, they get €5.8 million a year just for programs. So if they're trying to develop refereeing or other areas, they have €5.8 million to get to, plus they have €17 million on average on grassroots facilities, 17 a year to give out to the clubs for grassroots facilities. So we were starting on a journey that hadn't quite captured what it was, how low the funding was. But thankfully, we started on a mission with the government to get to know them. We've got to know pretty much all the ministers at this stage, at some level, a lot of the government officials, and we'll have good news next week on some money that comes from Welsh Government to go into this big grassroots pot that we're trying to build. We're trying to build a pot of somewhere between 30 and 60 million that we'll announce at some stage this year. It's money from DCMS, it's money from the Welsh Government, it's money from the Premier League, it's money from UEFA, FIFA, and our own bit of money that's been saved over time. So we're trying to put that out there and to get hundreds of clubs as stimulus for clubs to build things that are quite normal, actually. Like what we're doing is not extraordinary. It's just we're trying to catch up on the past, to be honest with you. The FAW's investment policy has been to get really good high performance facilities. So where my office is in Hensel, where the guys training that is fabulous. Dragon Park was built in 2012, nice. Colliers Park up north of Wales, very nice. £5 or £6 million into a training centre, which is great for, I see the referees, for example, the match officials training in Colliers Park. Whenever I go there, I see a good bunch of them, and that's great. But it doesn't get any more girls or boys really to play football. And our big plan for the next 5-6 years was launched last September. It's called Our Wales. It's to get from 90,000 players to 120,000 players. It's double the girls' game from 10,000 to 20,000. And then there's a whole lot of other barometers like high performance. So take high performance, for example. We've done well on the men's side over the last number of years. We're getting better at the women's side. Clearly, there's a great bunch in the women's senior team. But obviously, we're looking at the groups that come under it. So we've put together a technical advisory group of the likes of Chris Coleman, Ian Rush. We've a number of coaches that have UEFA Pro licenses from around Europe. We've a number of females on that group, look at the women's side of the game. And we've put together a group that can now analyze all of our performances and tell us how we're going. We launched the day of the France game, the Wales-France game down in Llanelli, the Women's International, our new high performance strategy, which is how we produce the next Jess Fishlock or Gareth Bale. How do we create great teams, international teams? And two things Wales are particularly good at from a European perspective is talent ID. So we've got 27 scouts that essentially go across England every weekend, and they look at players who currently play for Wales or ones who'd like to play for Wales, and they make connections with clubs. We pay them, I think it's £20 a week, plus mileage, plus a business card and a Wales jacket. But we end up every weekend with 27 reports on who's playing well. And the amount of dividends that comes back to Welsh football is enormous. Players like Ethan Ampadu, I mean, there's just a list of them who may not have grown up here, but wanted to play for Wales. And we don't lose any players to England, which is extraordinary, because when I was in Ireland, for example, I was sent back to manage the association when they were in trouble. We lost Jack Grealish and Declan Rice, for example, in the space of about a year, because they felt their opportunities were bigger with England. In Wales, we don't lose them, thankfully. And if you look at the bond amongst our players, I was struck, because I'm not Welsh, obviously. When I went in the first week I was here, I sat with the senior international men's players, and I told them what I was thinking about the plan for Wales. And they went off and had a team talk, and I sat down, I was on LiveScore or something, checking to see how my teams were doing. And I looked up, and there was Gareth Bale, and he wanted to speak about the development of grassroots football in Wales. And then other players came, and we ended up sitting around a table speaking for ages about the development of Welsh football. So we have a men's team that are very engaged. Then we met the women's team, the leadership team of 4 of them, explain what we're doing, and they got really engaged. So in early February, we'll have a meeting online between the 4 men senior representatives, which is Gareth, Aaron, Ben Davies and Chris Gunter, and the 4 female ones, which is Tash, it's Sophie Ingle, it's Jess Fishlock, and it's Helen Ward from Watford. So the 4 of them, the 2 fours will come together. We'll talk about this strategy of Welsh football and how we're developing the sport. So again, if you look at Whitchurch, even though we're only here 4 months, when I came to this very room to meet the club, they had 500 or 600 players. It really struck me that they didn't have a plan, a real plan. It was a lot of talk about selling this place and doing this thing and that kind of stuff. But I'm glad to say that in the last week, for example, I'm much clearer on the plan for Whitchurch by working with the government, and not just with the government, with other sports, because rugby have a big interest in it. Hockey, there's 500 members in Whitchurch of hockey club. It's the biggest hockey club, one of the biggest hockey clubs in Europe. And there's other sports interest in building a big community hub here. So next week they'll announce more funding for sport, and I have absolutely no doubt, I have a good sense that this village or town or area of the city, Whitchurch, will be well taken care of in that. But now the FAW is at the table with the government, most importantly. So we're having regular dialogue with Mark Drakeford at the very top, right through all of his officials. And they see us now as starting to see us, I should say, as a trusted partner. And one of the problems we had was we had a trust, and we had the FAW, which, working in UEFA, I could never understand. It was the only association on the planet that had 2 parallel organizations And one of them was organising the most important part of football in many ways, which was the grassroots side and the performance side of the game. It was actually running the trust. So for me, it was the bizarre situation where the technical director worked for the trust. I'll give you how bizarre it was. There's two kit men for the national team. One works for the trust and one works for the FAW. Standing beside each other, wearing the same tracks. They work for two different organisations and don't see each other between matches, or between camps. Now, is that a big deal? It kind of is, because when you've got physical barriers like buildings and people and different terms and conditions and stuff, it actually created two parallel organisations. So when I came here, when I did the interview with Mark and the guys on the panel, met the various officers and different things, the risk I was taking was when you came here that they wouldn't do big governance change. So we had heard in UEFA, and we'd seen evidence of how my predecessor was taken out, for example, that there was a council that was very powerful. And if they took a disliking to someone or something, that they could remove them. And that's fair enough. The council is the supreme body, but you need to have rationale and you need to have good governance behind your decision makings, which means equality, diversity, inclusion, for example. That if it's a big club of old white men, they'll tend to make the same kind of decisions. We all know this. Best governance practice means you must change, you must have different voices, you must have people, gender parity in a room to make the right decisions. You must have people from the BAM community in the room to make decisions that represent the modern Wales. We didn't have that, we don't have that, but now we've decided to do it, thankfully. So there was a piece of work done which was crucial to us, which is called the Sustainable Association of the Future. Someone came in, the former Scottish CEO, with a steering panel representing the whole game, and they basically did a whole look at Welsh football, and they came up with 80 changes that needed to be made. And that was delivered to us in September time, and brought to Wrexham in October, November, and voted through pretty much unanimously by all of the council, who accepted the need for change. And that change is quite significant, because it means the trust basically merges with the FAW in terms of the core football processes. We still want a very strong trust that's looking at things like accessibility, social inclusion, the mental health agenda, accessing pockets of money, for example, from different parts of the health service that a football association wouldn't be able to get, to help us get into communities that we probably wouldn't be able to get into without a specific focus on social inclusion. So that was a big thing to bring the trust together. So at the moment, we're going through the process of 2Ping about 40 people into the FAW, which is technical director, facilities, grassroots, all that kind of stuff is coming in now to the FAW. Match officials was in the FAW under Andrew Howard in competitions anyway. So there's not, I don't think, a fundamental change there. But what there is a change is all of the development officers across Wales, of which there's not enough to develop the sport. So, you know, we can see in middle of Wales, for example, that rugby are running rings around us in terms of development in schools. And that's not acceptable to me, because I want to get as many girls and boys to play football. So we're going to have to significantly increase our investment in development on the ground. We have 6 regional associations who, in this Sustainable Association of the Future, would have 6 key performance indicators. Sorry, 5. So that'll be like increased participation, getting more girls to play, making sure that our decision making in the regional associations have proper representation. So the 80 recommendations are being put in one by one now. It's a lot of work every day. It's things like sustainability. How will we create a sustainable game? Equality, diversity, inclusion. Our board by 2027 will be 40% female, for example, or it could be 60% female. It's 40% of one anyway. So it's all that stuff happening at the moment, and it's a lot to absorb. But that's going to get us right as an organization. And it's going to make us, it gives us the platform to become one of the best federations in Europe, no doubt. So if you look at our strategy, the 6 pillars to it, the vision is to go from the park football to the world stage. So Wales being able to play in Whitchurch and go and play in a World Cup. And thankfully we have local representatives who can do that. And hopefully we'll play in a World Cup later this year in Qatar. But to get the local pitch right is probably, in my time here over the next 5 years, 6 years, is probably going to be the biggest legacy that our time together we can leave, to be honest with you, because we've 950 clubs, we've 18,500 volunteers, and they're operating in an environment that is substandard. Park pitches with dogs on it, clubs who can't organise themselves, to be quite honest with you. And yet the potential is there everywhere I look. And I feel that we have to, if we don't stand up and say, we need £50 million as a starter to develop these pitches. No one else is going to do it. No one else is going to knock on our door and say, here you go, we'll help you. Waiting for local authorities or waiting for governments is not going to happen. So what we have to do is come ourselves with a clear plan, a clear strategy for what we're doing. And when you explain it to governments or local authorities, we've met, as I said, 22 of them now. Sorry, we've met 20 of the 22, one or two to go. We've met the CEOs of local authorities, the elected officials, and they're all buying into what we're saying because we have a plan. For the first time, really, we have a clear plan of what we're doing with pitches. We can show them where the pitches are. We have a map of the country. We can show what we've got. We can get from them what they've got, what they're planning to build. We know, for example, in Cardiff, this area here, the policy is to build all-weather pitches in schools, because schools have existing infrastructure, they have car parking, they normally have dressing rooms. So if you don't know that, you're knocking on the wrong door, but we do know they do. So we will build full-size all-weather pitch probably in Lisvane, in Corpus Christi High School, on the other side of the city, I suppose, not that far away. We'll build something here. I've no doubt about that in the next few months. We'll announce we're building an all-weather facility in Whitchurch. We'll build in Lanrumney with the House of Sport. There'll be a lot of pitches going to Lanrumney on the east of the city, something like 6 or 7 pitches, a number of them full-size all-weather pitches, which the FAW will be a partner in. There's a lot of pitches going like Ocean Way, where there's the girls' hub, for example, in the centre of the city. Grangetown has a magnificent facility for the community now, or Boottown, I should say. And we're seeing with the council, with the local authority, with Paul Orders, we know what they're doing for the next few years. They've got £12 million to spend. We know how they're spending it. All that said, we need the local leagues to respond to that. So just saying, for example, all games kick off on a Saturday at 3 o'clock is not today. That's a few years ago. That's not how it works in modern day. People have to be more flexible. For example, when I met a number of the providers around the city, they said, if you come around early on a Saturday morning, there's lots of all-weather facilities that have nobody on it. And later on in the day, they can't get enough pitches. So there's something wrong in the ordering of it. It's something that the likes of myself and Mark and others will look at, because it's fine that we get the FAW right, and we'll do that, I promise you, over the next few years. But then we're not delivering the game at the local level. It's the regional associations, the leagues and different actors are delivering locally. So if we don't get that right as well, then there's no point in having us perfectly right if the grassroots that's delivering on the ground is right. So I think it's fine to have a governance review of the FAW, but I think we need to go a bit deeper than that. And it's something that we'll do by asking the clubs, how do you feel? We'll do it, I think, quite soon. We'll ask the club soon, what are the barriers to you being the best you can be? So one of the things I see the most of is a club coming to me and says, we'd love a full-size all-weather pitch. I hear that a lot. And then you ask, well, what have you got? Who's working for you? What's your plan? Shows your business plan, your volunteer workforce, who's behind you. And then you realize very quickly they're not able to manage this. So what we have to do as an FAW is to put business planners behind these clubs and to help them. In this very room, as I say, Whitchurch presented to me their plans, and it was a lovely presentation until the very end. And I realized, looking around the room, they're not ready to invest. This club was not ready to invest nearly £1 million. It needs to be a more collaborative, joined up effort, and the FAW has to take more responsibility for that to happen. So as I say, we've gone out to the world with a plan, with some investment, and I can feel already the laws of attraction. When you've got a clear plan and you talk about it and you show them you mean business, I can see the government, I can see the local authorities, I can see the Premier League we presented to earlier this week. We asked them for a lot of money, we explained to them why we needed that money, and they said at the end of the presentation they'd never seen something so clear in what they could support. Now, what they give us, I suppose, will be the more important answer, but the point is that when we go to Welsh Government now, we're really confident that we've a just cause, which is grassroots football in Wales. We believe we have a very just cause. Once we have the grassroots done, so I'm hoping to parcel up the package for the stimulus for grassroots football in the next few months, announce it, have the independent panel set up, which will be people from Welsh Government, Sport Wales, the council, the regional associations, etc., local authorities, on an independent panel that pays for these pitches across Wales. And I couldn't care less whether they're built, to be quite honest with you, because it doesn't matter to me once the girls and boys play football on them, we hit our targets in terms of participation. Once we do that, once we have our business plan of the FAW delivered to the end of 27, and we have all of our cash flows done, which will be quite soon, we'll bring it to the board. We're doing a new finance audit and risk committee at the same time to make sure that we're doing things really well governance-wise and really well financially. Once that's done, then I feel that my attention will turn towards the Premier Division here. That's my feeling. I think once we've set that up, one of the things I think we failed quite badly in Wales over a long period of time, as an outsider looking on, is the coefficient of our men's Premier League. Thankfully, the women's have gone through a restructure, and I can see a lot of light there coming from the women's game everywhere. Participation, more women getting involved in the sport at administration level, all that's coming, and there'll be a lot more work from us on programs and different things to get more women involved in the game. Great. But I think in a couple of years' time, maybe hopefully shorter, that we'll put a good focus, hopefully with the government, on our top flight. And the reason I say that is because even I'm from the grassroots, and the 950 grassroots clubs we have, that we have to get that right. I still feel we can do better in European competition. We can produce more players, and it's complex there because upstairs in my building with Cardiff City there, and if I look out on the grass, I can see 3 or 4 of our centre forwards in the Wales squad playing with Cardiff City, but they're not playing in our tier, which is no problem. I mean, we actually benefit massively from it because we don't invest in Cardiff City, and yet they're spending loads of money developing players that play for Wales. That's great. But I still feel as a national association, we have responsibility to create a competition, male and female, that's the best it can be in its own situation. The problem probably is that there's not a huge desire politically in town when I meet to the government. It's not on their radar, to be honest with you. The way our association is made up, there's a lot of people from tier 2, tier 3 in different parts of the game who are hungry, who want their own part of the game served. So, when you get a big democracy like we have, which is great, there's an argument in a lot. If you look at the best countries in Europe, they've broken the league out of the association because it's an uneasy truce between professional football and the rest of the game. So again, if you look at more than half the countries in Europe, certainly the most successful ones, the league is not in the association. And there's a reason for that. It's because when you need a big focus on a professional league, it needs proper focus. With me as the CEO, I could be talking about match officials one day. You can be talking about the girls' game the next hour. You can be talking about governance. You can talk about this. A professional league needs its own focus. It needs someone, a CEO. It needs a commercial director. Whereas we have shared services. So our commercial director is dealing with the national team here, the women's game here, the league here. The league's not that sexy. It's hard to sell. There's other things, that are more pressing. I can make more my targets if I do something else and work with the national team. So that's a dynamics challenge that we have. So the 6 big things we're looking at, such as participation and making sure we evolve, that we're not Kodak, we're more like Apple. Kodak thought we'd always use cameras. If we think it's always going to be 11 aside with match officials and with corner flags and nets and that, the football will always be like that as a participatory sport, then we've got a problem. Because people, we can see clearly, are moving towards the goal centres or more flexible formats of playing. I was at the goal centre tonight, actually. There's loads of match officials there. I didn't realise that match officials did these informal games. The 11-a-side game and the small-sided games at youth level, that will stay. We'll always have a need for loads of match officials. What I'm saying is, myself as a 45-year-old, I can't do Tuesday night and Thursday night and play a match on a Saturday. The family won't, it doesn't work. So I will go to the goal centre or somewhere like that on a Tuesday night, pay my £3 or £4 or £5, play for an hour and go home. And that's my physical activity. It's good for my mental health. It's good for my physical health. I see my friends, I go home. So the FAW has never played a role really in that part of the game. So one of the position changes we have to do, I'll talk about 2 of them. One is, we're not Welsh football. We're actually moving our position from Welsh football to football in Wales. And that might sound like a very simple thing to say. It's actually quite a different position to take. All football in Wales. So on Comet, we've 98,000 or so registered players that we can see their name, their date of birth. But there's more than 100,000 people we know from the studies we've done who are playing football somewhere. We just don't know where they are and who they are. So that's quite an interesting thing for FAW to take responsibility. And why? Because we feel that anyone who kicks the ball, who loves our game, is part of our family, and we should be trying to get them into the game as a match official. Because if you kick around with someone, we know from our studies, I've done a master's on it a few years ago, on the link between participation, kicking a ball, enjoying the sport, and wanting to be part of the sport. So I'll give you a simple example. If someone does fencing, which I've never done, I don't think I ever would do, but if you do fencing, you're far more likely to watch fencing in the Olympic Games. Sounds obvious. Because football's so big, we don't think like that. But we know, for example, in Dutch stadiums, over 70% of the people in the stadiums the weekend are involved with a grassroots club. We know that when we play against Austria in Cardiff that night, from our stats, we know from the comment system that a large percentage of the people coming to the stadium are from the grassroots game, which allowed us, we put up the ticket prices ever so slightly for the Austria game, an average of £4. And you're very welcome to ask me about that, because it's something that we brought to the officers and brought to the board, and I felt quite strongly about, because we've got to make money for the grassroots game. We have to do it. Our ticket prices compared to rugby, I was a bit shocked when I went to the Principality for the first game. I think it was £100 or something, the ticket to watch the rugby friendly. When we played against Belgium, the last game, and we played against the game before it was Belarus. Belgium certainly was a full house. And the profit we make from that game to go back into grassroots is so small, it would shock you. That's with a full stadium. So we've kept the ticket prices very low. We always will keep the ticket prices very low. But what's very important is that we're transparent, that we show with this ticket price increase of £4, which if you go £4 by say 30,000, because we use complementaries and different things, we should make just over £100,000 on that. It's very important we show that £105,000, whatever it is, from each of the matches, goes straight back into the grassroots. That's where the openness and transparency, with absolutely nothing to hide at the FAW. It's really clear what we're trying to do. We, as a participation, the women's game is really growing. High performance, making sure we continually compete. We haven't done great at 17s, 19s, 21s actually. So while the senior men's team has done well, the women's team is clearly doing very well in its group now. We haven't really done great at the lower age levels. We haven't been getting to Euros and different things. So we have a good bit to go at the younger age levels. I'm really confident the system that we have, that we will get to a lot more 17s, 19s, and under 21 tournaments. Our workforce, 19,500 volunteers or so, many of whom need help. They really need help because they're struggling, out working all day, coming back at night time and trying to organize a football club. They need digital help from us. They need training help from us. And we really need to upskill them to deal with the modern demands of clubs. Comet has been a big stress on everybody. Yet, can I tell you, Comet is a godsend to us. I can press a button, I can see where everyone is playing football. I can see a map, and it shows where everyone is registered playing football, 98,000 people. I can see who's match officiating the weekend as such, and it'll get better and it'll get better. And it'll allow the clubs themselves to use it in the future and market to see who will become match officials. So we could speak, for example, to anyone over the age of 35 who plays football to say there's a match officials course up here, so we can directly communicate with them, and we'll do more and more of that to speak to people in their different life's changes in football, I would say. Inspirational fit for purpose facilities is a big part of what we do. I think I've given you our strategy on that, is to raise a lot of money and to distribute it out into the grassroots and for you to see it. So we'll give out £2.6 million in the next 2 months to somewhere between 40 and 80 clubs, somewhere like that. And you'll see them. And for me, I'm not sure of this, I wasn't here, but I can see from the books, I can see from the investments we made, this is quite new for the FAW. To be awarding like 100 grand here, 50 grand here to a grassroots club for facilities is actually a new style for us. And that's something that we're going to do over the next few years, is give out a lot of money to a lot of grassroots clubs. So if you took, for example, if we managed to get to £50 million over the next number of years, that is 200 clubs getting £250,000. And that would make a hell of a difference. I'll tell you why, because if you look at Sport Wales, which is the only other, apart from the local authorities, the only national funds available to a club today, if I'm with Church AFC, if I go looking for national funding, I'd have to go to Sport Wales. I can either get a £20,000 grant, which I have to crowdfund for, or I can get up to 50,000, which I have to match fund. Now, first of all, £20,000 will do nothing for a major development, as you know. £50,000 doesn't actually do anywhere near enough to do a radical change of something. So it would need to be kind of an add-on of some sort. To radically change somewhere, you need hundreds of thousands of pounds. So to be fair to them, grass pitches is nothing like that. You need a lot less to get a grass pitch rolled and cut and that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of grass pitches in our plan, to be fair. But when, and we're very happy to do it anytime you want, is to present our facilities plan. You'll see what we'll build, you'll see what we'll maintain, you'll see what we'll develop over the next 5 or 6 years. I think it'll be exciting for you. I think you'll see game-changing stuff at the grassroots level. So I hope that's given you a sense. I mean, there's a lot going on with the 80 governance changes, with the facility strategy, with the whole restructure of the organization, to be honest with you. 80, as I say, the 80 things that are there. I don't know if you've seen a copy of the 80 changes that we've put out. I think it's really worth anybody involved in Welsh football should see it, because it's quite radical what we're doing, changing decision-making bodies, etc. And what I also would say is they'll all be delivered in the next year or two. And all that is the start to the next rung of changes. Because once you do the first set of changes, you go onto a governance journey of continual change to make sure we're the best association we possibly can. So what I can say to you, if it's of any value to you, is as somebody who doesn't come from here, who's come to here to be the CEO for the next number of years, I'm far happier now today looking at you and looking at you than I was when I accepted the role. Even though I was happy that day, because I knew it was a new chapter, a new journey, I'm completely convinced, with not a shadow of a doubt, that all things being equal, unless something catastrophic happens, that we will be in an unbelievably better place as an association, all across Wales, as a game, within 5 years. I promise you that. So it's a very positive, only I can see that, along with the officers who see us working together, along with the board who get to see a little bit less because we just meet less. The officers, the 4 officers that come from the council, I would see more of. But the board we see every single month. We'll see them next week. The council we see every couple of months. And there's a lot of dialogue, I think it's fair to say, between us all. We're talking every day by text or email or phone call. Saturday morning, I'll give you a simple example. We had a case where Vaughan Gesson wrote to me, and he said, there's a young boy from Barbados who can't play for Penarth Raiders. And the reason he can't play is he's going to boarding school down in Penarth. And the FIFA rules don't allow him to play as a boarding school. I didn't know that. If you go to boarding school in a different country, you're not seen as a resident of that country. And therefore, if you go to boarding, so basically the FAW had said to this young player, look, you're 15, when you're 18, we can look to register you. Now, I was just sitting there thinking to myself, that just sounds wrong somehow. That someone's come to Wales from Barbados, he's going to school, he's training with his friends Tuesday and Thursday night. When match comes on a Saturday, he can't play. He's not allowed to play. He actually trains up with them, trains them before the game and puts on his tracksuits as much as his friends play. And our big drive at the FAW is, at this period of time, is grassroots and participation, going from 90,000 to 120,000. So it just did not fit right with any of us. The officers were worried. They'd had a case. They played Marcus illegally a couple of times, and there was a case taken which they lost, and they got a fine and they got a points deduction, all that stuff. And it just didn't sit right. So we decided to challenge FIFA's rules. Over Christmas, I went down and met Marcus with 2 people from Vaughan Getton's office actually came along, which is great that the politicians felt strong enough to get involved. Met the coaches, met the friends of the family, went online, met his parents in Barbados, who happened to be lawyers, by the way, which is quite interesting because they had read the case and it was great. So we had a great debate, but the fact was, when I contacted FIFA, and I had a bit of luck because I actually was very good friends with the chief legal officer there because we worked at UEFA together before. So I rang Emilio and I said, Emilio, forget about all the rules, forget about contracts, forget about all your training. This just doesn't sound right. This boy is standing watching his friends play and we're talking about participation. It flies in the face of everything we're saying publicly. So the good news is that was going on for months and months and months, all over Christmas, quite a emotive case, I think it was for many people. The good news is that, hey, okay. The good news is that yesterday, Marcus was registered after many, many months of battle. It went to Gianni Infantino. It went to Fatma Samor, who was the General Secretary of FIFA, this case in Wales. And we found a loophole in the rules that allowed him to play as a particular type of student. And I just saw an email today from his parents in Barbados. Their young son is away in Wales, many miles from them. And they just felt the FAW actually cared for them. They actually cared about them. The club feel the FAW care for them. And that's one case. But my job and the job of the board and the officers is to make sure that you feel care from us. You actually think, when you look in our eyes, do we actually care about you? Or are we just here to do our job and think that we're great in football and that, or do we really care about what you? So if any of you come to us and say, this is my challenge, And if we can help you with it, whether it's building a pitch, whether it's doing a course in refereeing, whether it's respect towards refereeing, whatever it is, that we've got the people and we've got the love for the game to just roll up our sleeves and solve the thing and just get the game better and just be one family, together stronger. We say about the national team, that has to be between you and us. It has to be. Otherwise, it's bullshit, to be honest with you. It's just a slogan. I was at the game between Portugal, the semi-final down in Lyon, because I was living in Neon, actually, which is where UEFA is. We drove down one beautiful Sunday morning and went to Wales and Portugal. And somehow, the way it worked, I was working that day. Working was talking, by the way. Wearing a UEFA suit at the match, I ended up in the Wales end for the game against Portugal. And we lost to Portugal. And I'll never forget the sunshine in Lyon, the bond between the supporters and the players was something unbelievable. I was crying in the stand, and I'm not Welsh, because of that connection between player and supporters. It was extraordinary that summer down in France. What we have to do is translate that into this, that bond between FAW, referee society, match officials, grassroots clubs. And here's how we have to do it, in my view, and I'll finish with this. We must create a movement, not where the referees are looking at the FAW saying, what are you doing? I was looking at you going, what are you doing? We're in this together. We solve things together and we do it bit by bit. So one of the things that a football club has to, we'll go on a road show in February, meeting all the 6 different areas and meet all of the 950 clubs, I hope. We're not a football club in the modern era. We have a much bigger role in society in many of the villages and towns that we are. We're actually a wellness space. We're a wellness center for mental health and for physical health. That's a very different position to just putting on kits and playing a match. We can solve not all the problems of the country. We can solve a lot of them. I'll give you a simple example. I went home during lockdown to Ireland. I flew back to see my mother. I hadn't seen her for a year. She lives in the west of Ireland. Got a hire car, drove to my mother's house in the middle of nowhere. It's just outside a village. And my friends would know when I have a car, when I'm there. They wouldn't know my car was a hire car. One of my friends saw the car was outside and called to see was I there. Small village. Well, John, how's things? He said, look, we've a game of 5-a-side tonight. Will you come down along? And I hadn't realized that my mental health was struggling. I was busy at work, had just had a child, everything great, life was good. I wasn't meeting anyone. It was all done online. I hadn't seen my friends, hadn't had a pint, nothing. And we'd just been in the house together all the time in Switzerland, in an apartment, and I hadn't realized the damage I had done until I said, okay. And I was quite tired, actually. I was thinking about not going, but I put on my stuff and I went down to the 5-a-side pitch, small artificial turf, a bad one, by the way. And we played football for 90 minutes, which is a long 5-a-side, by the way. Long time. We haven't played for a while, so long. The next day, you know about it. After the 5-a-side, I went home and had a shower. And I felt like I wouldn't have sold that feeling for $1 million, honestly. It was friends I'd gone to school with. It was us taking the mickey out of each other. It was us playing like we were children again, 4 or 5 years of age. And it was worth the world to me. And I could feel my whole thing. For weeks after, I felt better about life. Now, if that's me, who I think is quite balanced, I can't think of a single complaint that I have. What about someone who's got weaknesses or has trouble or has strife, who has problems with paying the bills, who has problems in their family, who has all sorts of issues, addiction issues? What can football do? If that could do that for me in that little period, what can that do for the people? So we have pure gold in our hands. I met Tracy Cooper from the NHS this morning, the CEO of Public Health Wales, and I was explaining to her, football is medicine. Football is pure medicine for the soul. And if our clubs can understand that if they can serve the people, there's a club down in the West Wales, Ammanford, they've got the Jack Lewis Foundation, and they have a counselling service in the club. It's a wellness space, a place like this, where if you have a problem, you can go into the club and you can meet a counsellor. Over 100 people in the village have self-referred themselves to the club to go and get mental health treatment. Over 100 people in the village. It was done because a boy of 27 hung himself in the village, and the father of his girlfriend felt so bad about the whole thing that he had nowhere to go. He'd looked for help and couldn't get help, and built a mental health guidance centre, counselling service within the football club. That attracts loads of funding. It attracts people. Full-time counsellor in the football club. The club is now a hub in the community. And you're looking at it going, so it's more than just football. It's a hub. It's where people will open up. As a person of 45, I never used to speak to my friends about my feelings, my mental health, if I was anxious about something. Now that's what we do. and my nephews, nieces, they talk about that stuff a lot more than we do. So if we can open the club up as a movement of wellness and of being a responsible citizen, making the world better, I think we'll be in a much better place rather than talking about the rules and rather about this guy was, I know we've got to live by the rules. We really must. And if we start breaking our own rules, then we're in real trouble. So we count on you and our decision-making bodies and the authorities to keep the rules right, because it brings order to everything. But we have to think sometimes beyond that we're a wellness space. And even for you as match officials, we have a duty of care to your mental health when you're going out there refereeing and officiating. It's our responsibility to make sure your mental health is right. So I'm sorry it was a bit all over the place, but there's so much happening at the moment. It's hard to put into one clear framework. Have a look online. You'll see Our Wales, our strategy. It's very clear what we're doing. It'll put more of a framework into how I said it, but I hope I took you on a small bit of a journey in terms of what we're doing. As I say, we can go back to match officials now. When we started, we had a crisis of numbers. I was getting a lot of emails back then, Mark, actually, saying don't have enough referees, don't have enough. That's gone. I'm not saying the problem's gone by a long way. What I'm saying is I'm not getting any messages now to say that's a problem today. It sure is, by the way, except it doesn't feel like it's epidemic just of today. We're going to make sure that's not the case, because Mark and the referees committee have put together a very good strategy. It's been stress tested by their associations. It's got excellent digital people. It's been checked by commercial people. We've got Lee Evans coming in now to manage that and deliver that strategy. We're hiring the first ever person on, and why we're hiring, I'll give you an example of how grassroots gets benefit from the national team. I had said to Mark before the game, I think what would be a good idea, if we qualify for the playoffs and we get 2 home gates, which we got, we'll hire 2 people. It was a suggestion, thankfully the officers supported. We'll hire somebody to just be focused for the first time on getting more match officials and keeping the ones that we have, which sometimes is even more difficult than getting new ones. Keeping the ones that we have, sometimes we forget about that. It's like a bucket. They come in at the top, but we're losing all the ones at the hole at the bottom because we haven't treated the ones we have right. But we're hiring now, and it's out there, a match officials recruitment and retention. First time we've ever done it. So we have a plan. We now have 2 in the match officials department, but we also hired someone to support Jason Webber and the work he's doing in equality, diversity, inclusion. And I believe the FAW within 5 years, it's very good now. We speak to the politicians now, they think we're a very good organisation. For the use of the Welsh language, for example, they think we're way ahead of other sports. Maybe we didn't design it. Our supporters certainly use the Welsh language a lot. But the organisation has set up a Welsh group now on our history, our language, our culture. Sustainability strategy is almost ready. Well, it'll be ready soon. I told you, that was the last thing I'll say. One more thing to say to you. Sorry. On the 15th of March, we'll hold our first ever Welsh Football Coalition meeting. At that meeting will be FIFA, UEFA, Welsh Government, Sport Wales, the regional associations, about 25 grassroots clubs in the forum, staff from the FAW, the board, the shareholders, and we're picking a subject, sustainability, to talk about how the FAW can be brilliant in sustainability. It's one subject. We'll have Sophie Howe presenting the Wellbeing Act of 2015, the future generations, what sustainability means to Wales. Then we'll have UEFA presenting their brand new sustainability strategy, which looks at things like human rights, all these different areas, the economy, or the environment, I should say, all this kind of stuff. So we'll build a sustainability strategy in dialogue with the world, with FIFA, UEFA, the Welsh Government. We'll do it together. We're going to build, we've just launched our equality, diversity, inclusion strategy, which is world class in terms of the targets that it has and how we'll deliver it. And one by one, the Welsh language will bring more out. We will keep match officials. We want to be the best in Europe at bringing in match officials and taking care of them. And we can't do that without good dialogue between us and bring it together. We'll do it. We just need to agree it together, deliver it. It's no problem. It's just getting there. We have the resources. That's the good news. Are we low at the FAW? Absolutely not. I can assure you we're not. There'll always be pressure on from the officers and the board on me to squeeze costs and to increase revenue so we have more to put back into the grassroots. That's just the way it is. We'll never be foolish with what we invest. We'll make sure every pound we spend, or we should, that it's right for the game. But we will drive a lot of revenues over the next few years, and you'll see it, I promise you, within the grassroots game over the next 5 years. You'll see it in 2 months' time. You'll see an announcement of a lot of grassroots clubs getting big checks from the FAW Grassroots Facilities Fund for the first time, and then we go forward. So listen, thanks for allowing me to speak to you tonight. I hope that was informative. I hope there was a sense of excitement we all feel about the future.
Diolch yn fawr and thank you for watching the video. Hope you liked it. Please subscribe to the channel.